Cloud. Here we go. Welcome. Excellent. Wonderful. So I am going to begin without any further ado. Kayla is our wonderful Israel guide. I would only do Israel with Kayla by my side. She has led, as the educator, all of our Israel trips here from Temple Beth El. And as she just said, her specialty is also Spain. And Kayla knows from New England, having grown up near here, and speaks our language. And is wicked cool, as they say. So I'm going to turn it over to her to share what is going on in the ground in Israel with the morale. And Kayla, if you want to share a little bit more about yourself, I will also
Sure.
let you do that as well. Here we go.
Sure. Okay, well, thank you for inviting me to enjoy your lunch and learn. It really it means a lot to us here to know that you there really are invested in care and want to know what's going on. As much as you can read the news and everything like that, to have to take the time to hear personal reflections, it's very important and very meaningful to us. And that's something I'll talk about a little bit more. We're running solidarity missions now, and I did guide one about 2 weeks ago, my first one. And it was really beautiful to see how important it was to the Israelis and to the Americans. It was sort of everyone building each other up, which was really what it is all about, that we're Am Yisrael and we're all one people. Shevet Achim Gam Yachad. So I grew up in Randolph, Mass, up Route 24. And I grew up in the conservative movement. So Temple Beth Am, Alav Shalom, which is now part of B'nai Tikva, for those of you who are in on the South Shore Jewish scene. I went to Camp Yavna, so some of you might know people from that, which is connected to the Hebrew College. And that sort of set me on a path, which eventually led to my making Aliyah, which next week, oh my gosh, 5 days from now will be my 27th year of Aliyah, which I find a little crazy. So I made Aliyah and I did the tour guide course and found my way into Keshet right after that. So I've been with Keshet Educational Journeys for over 20 years. So it's really been a wonderful home. The people I work with, we have an amazing team, and it really feels like mishpacha. So that's nice. What I was asked maybe to talk about, so I will, and obviously I'm going to leave time for at the end for questions, because I think that's probably the most interesting way to go about this, was to talk a little bit about the IDF in the home front, so in the resilience of the home front, because our army is not like any other army. The way it's made up and how it reflects the society, it's probably completely different than an army anywhere else in the world. So I'm sure you're all familiar with the idea that the IDF, the Israel Defense Forces, has a draft. It's always had a draft. It drafts both men and women, most men and most women, although there are categories of people who don't serve. We're just going to leave all of that to the side right now. And most serve from 18 for 2 or 3 years, depending on what they do and where they serve. But then it's also the backbone happens to actually be our reserve soldiers. And that's why people who, once they're out of their mandatory service, they still go supposedly 1 month a year until the age of 45 for training or actually doing stuff so that they're always combat ready. And on October 7th, we need everyone to be combat ready. So the IDF has a lot of aspects to it that I think fall in the more like social realm, that it's not just about being a military, because it really does grab people from all different facets of Israeli society. So there's the educational core, which part of basic training is going around the country and learning about Jewish and Israeli history so that you know what it is you're fighting for. Then there are a lot of Olim, new immigrants or lone soldiers from different places. And so they need a little extra help sometimes, or some of them, they need Olpan. They're Hebrew, or they're from the Bedouin community, and they, their Hebrew isn't so great. So they actually learn Hebrew. Some of them finish their GREs, like they actually finish their high school education while in the Army. So like there's this whole sociological side to it, in addition to the defense side to it. Then, as I'll talk about more, especially what happens right now, is that there's no clear definition, excuse me, there's no clear definition in Israel between the military and the civilian, because at any time someone all of a sudden dons their IDF uniform and then the Army, whereas, a few hours ago they were teaching in a classroom or working in a supermarket or in a high-tech company, or their own small business or whatever. So it's very difficult to blur, it's a very blurry line between what's the civilian and what is the military. And lastly, Israel is not going off and fighting in wars all over the place. The only unit we have that we send far afield is our rescue unit that we send to after natural disasters and things like that, where we have our search and rescue team, which will go out. But, we're not here. The IDF is not here to go out and conquer land and everything. We're here to really protect within our own borders. And that means that everyone's fighting very close to home. And what sort of I find funny is, the idea that if your son or daughter doesn't come home for Shabbat, 2 Shabbats in a row, oh my God, you haven't seen your kid forever. And I keep thinking, like Americans whose soldiers were sent off, to Iraq and Afghanistan is like, they didn't come home for 6 months at a time, a year. How long is a tour, So everything's just smaller and closer. And also, everybody knows everybody. So again, that the blurring of the lines between military and civilian, and the absolute necessity of having a strong home front, because the home front is inevitably involved in the conflict. It is not 6,000 or 8,000 miles away. It's right here. I made a little PowerPoint presentation because I thought that it would be good to look at some pictures. So I'm going to start that now. I hope that it'll work okay. Let me go that. All right, so I think everyone can see it, right? Right? We're all set? Okay. So this is basically the IDF after October 7th. The standing army is about 170,000 people, made up of compulsory service. So that's your draft years, the 2 to 3 years that men and women serve. It's called Sadir in Hebrew. And then those who choose to be career officers, or keva. So those are the people who say this is going to be, I'm staying on for, signing on for to become an officer and then to continue. And many of them serve usually into their 30s or 40s. If you're someone like a pilot or the head of, a commander of a nuclear submarine, you must sign on for at least 7 years after your basic service, because so much training has been spent on you. And then you must give them like 1 day a week for your life to keep you combat ready. So there are some people where their keva is their everyday job, and then some people who, after a certain amount of time, might have a regular job, but 1 day a week are actually showing up at their bases and are active. Right now, there were 330,000 reservists who showed up between October 7th and October 10th or 11th. The call out that went out is called a Tzav Shmona, and there's the little icon of what that looks like. That is a compulsory call up to reserve duty. 300,000 were sent, and 330,000 people showed up. So 130,000 people got called up, meaning all these people who did not get a Tzav Shmona went to their bases. Some of these people were around the world on their little treks after the army, or were working in abroad or studying abroad, and they got on the first plane they could get on and get to Israel, which, if you remember, was no easy task, because almost all the international carriers, aside from El Al, shut down flying to Israel almost immediately. So El Al sent out rescue flights in order to bring Israelis home. And that's just goes to, I don't know any other country where so many people rush home because of war and don't flee because of war. But again, we're defending our home, and that's what happens. And here are just some pictures of, I think, what you expect soldiers to look like. Mostly these are combat soldiers. On the right, people, there's the drone, a drone that we got for them. You know, young guys, ready to serve. We got a bunch of tactical gloves for another group through our emergency funds. But the IDF has a lot of faces. Some of you who have come to Israel with me have met Yaakov Sullivan up in the Golan at Tel Saki. He runs the site there. He's a major. He's a tank commander. But he's now, these are in the fields of Shokedah, which is across the street from Be'eri, across the road from Be'eri. And he came and visited my group that were in the middle picking lemons. And there's a funny story, is that his job, he's operations manager, so he's actually in a base right outside on the border, but he goes in regularly to meet with people in his battalion, and he doesn't have like the regular big backpack, so he grabbed the nearest thing close to him, which was this Volt, which is like, you know, Uber Eats delivery, and he just threw everything he needed to bring them into that, and like shows up, and it was like a very funny thing. And then it, you know, went viral. And now every time he goes in to bring things to the unit, he uses the Wolt bag, but he actually is now bringing literally people are asking like for special requests, and he's fulfilling that. So he even got a picture of himself on a bicycle to make it look like he's like really a Wolt delivery guy. But I just wanted to throw this in because some of you have met Yaakov. He left, you know, his wife and 3 children who live up in the Golan, and has barely been home in 100+ days, because that's what you have to do. On the right is Ari Ehrlich. So some of you have met Danny Ehrlich. He might have taken you through Yad Vashem, correct? So Danny's his oldest son, Rafi, is in Miluim. He's up in the northern border. Ari is his middle son, who is he's a career officer. He's a major in the 188th Armored Corps Battalion. And his son-in-law is also serving, so I don't know where he is now. Ari's, you know, 2 weeks into the war, had another baby born. So here he is in the hospital. He made it, he was able to get out in time to be there for the birth. And he actually made it out for the Brit, because a week later he was already in Gaza and has barely been out. So that's what it means when you have your reservists called up. A lot of them are family people and are building families or have kids or in the process of having more kids. And on the left is Ari lighting Hanukkah candles with his family at home through FaceTime. Again, the home front command giving support, that people back at home, the usually wives and mothers, but not always, who are now single moms, you know, and maybe still working as well and having to deal with all this. So there's a lot of grandparents who also have gotten what we call the Tzav Shmona. They've also been called up. On the left, Yitzchak Sokolov, you might have met him. He's the founder and owner of Keshet, from Sharon originally. So he is over 65, he's 69, and he actually went and volunteered and got literally back into uniform. As he said, he's been out of the army longer than some of the people he was serving by are old, like they weren't even born, and he had already been out of the army that long. He was working as a driver for a unit not in Gaza, but around the border, protecting the communities there and doing different things. So here he is with his grandkids when he has an after, as they call it. And then, of course, there are plenty of women in the Army. So these are two women on a base near the Gaza border, and we brought them some gifts. So, you know, they were happy. They were like, we got them like bubbles and funny things and whatever, just to cheer them up. But it's now 90% of all Army positions are open to women, which includes combat positions. And the statistics now are something about I think 60% of different combat positions are actually being filled by women. So they are out there. They are in Gaza right now. There are plenty of women who are paramedics, who are intelligence officers, communication officers, and others like that, who are actually in Gaza fighting and documenting and doing operations and doing what they do, mamash in Gaza. So there have been a lot of talk the past few years about women and serving and whether they should be in tank units and whether or not they should be in combat. And very quickly, what's happened over the past few months has solidified that, yes, not only should women serve and can they serve, but they are excellent at doing their jobs and have saved many lives on October 7th and continue to do so. So I think there's going to be a lot of sort of shifts coming out of what happened, what's happening in this war. And one is more acceptance of women in forefront battle positions and rising up the ranks. As well as a little bit of a shift in the Haredi world, which I'm actually not going to talk about unless someone really wants me to later. We bring stuff. So now the Home Front Command is like, well, they got to make sure they got to eat, you know, they can't just be having, you know, war rations. We got to bring them pizza and good food and whatever. So everyone is cooking for soldiers everywhere and just bringing them food nonstop. You know, what's the adage is that an army runs on its stomach. Well, you can imagine a Jewish army has to run on like mama's cooking. So there's been a lot of that going on. This is on Moshav Shokedah. This is like a little rest area for soldiers. So if they have some time, they can come over. This Moshav is a religious Moshav. As I mentioned, it is really right. It's between Kfar Aza and Be'eri. And Kfar Aza and Be'eri were like two of the most hard hit on the attack. And this one, it's a religious Moshav. And so their gate was completely closed. So Hamas weren't able to like get in. And they just sort of skipped by it. And therefore, everyone's evacuated, but there was no damage and massacre on Shokedah. So there are people from the Moshav who come back or just other residents from the area, and they set up in front of like at the main entrance in front of their synagogue and like their main parking lot, this R&R area. So there's food and that soldiers can come and do their laundry. And then wait, let me go back. There's an area here. They have like these nice lounge chairs. They can just sort of take a breather while their laundry's being done. Everyone's bringing home cooked food and goodies and this and that. We had a lovely packed lunch with my group. And of course we had extra and we had quiche and we had bao buns and like quinoa salad. So I'm like, brought it right over. So that the extra so that they could eat it. So that's going on all over the place, but in the north and in the south, setting up these areas that soldiers can get fed, where they can do laundry, where they can maybe take a shower. There's one place that's giving, you know, massages and therapy. You know, they brought out people to like cut hair. When they're women, they came out and they're giving them little manicures, anything to sort of make them feel better and help them de-stress. Obviously, people are coming and bringing gifts for the soldiers and bringing all sorts of things, and that's whether or not they're Israelis or people coming from abroad. So this was one of our groups. It was, can you tell what time of year it was? There's a hint in the picture. see down here, Sufganiyot. Yep, they came. It was still Hanukkah, so they came and brought them some things, and of course had to give them, make sure that they had some donuts. And as I mentioned, there's not just the Tzav Shmona for the army, but the Tzav Shmona here, it's written Ezrachi, the citizen Tzav Shmona. One of the places where volunteers are doing a huge amount is in agriculture. So most of the Israeli agriculture is dependent on two major labor forces, Palestinian workers, which obviously from Gaza, there are none, and from West Bank, there haven't been any. They're talking about letting some of them back in. And foreign workers, mainly Thai. So after the attack, the 40,000 or so Thai workers went back to Thailand. Some of them are starting to come back, but basically, or the farmers themselves have been called up. So there's just a dearth of people to bring in all of that stuff, just work in agriculture. So everything that needs to be picked or planted. Some places, the farms are total losses. Others are trying to do whatever we can do. It's also strategic because we need to make sure that Israel has its own food security, that we really do grow our own food, especially when you see what's happening with the Houthim in the Red Sea. And there could be embargoes. There could be people who it's not companies that aren't taking the financial risk to ship to Israel because of the threat from other places, or things like what's going on with the criminal court. There could be companies and countries and shipping companies that will say they're not going to deal with Israel anymore. I mean, what's going on is everywhere. It's not just the fighting that's going on here. It's what's going on in the world stage, which we're being attacked in many different ways. So agriculture. This is Druze. This is in a Druze Bedouin town in the Negev, where they are providing food packages for evacuees within the community and for other people. This is the Brothers and Sisters in Arms headquarters in Tel Aviv, Achim L'Neshek. So they, within a few hours of the attack, they mobilized about 15,000 people to start volunteering in a million different ways, providing rides to people to get to the reserve units in the first few days, going down and then rescuing dogs and pets. There were pets that were lost. There were pets where their owners were killed. There are people who evacuated and couldn't take their pets or couldn't find their pets because they got scared, and then going down and getting them and bringing them back and trying to reunite them with their families if possible. People who evacuated hotels, they can't have their pets in the hotel. So now finding people to foster or adopt pets has become like a huge thing. It's getting clothing. All these people literally left with, some of them left with nothing, literally nothing, not their cell phones, not their IDs, not a wallet. Some left with maybe a bag. And the bag, that was October, it was spring. Now it is winter, completely different, and you've got little kids who grow, and grow out of their clothes very quickly. So constantly needing to provide clothes for the evacuees, different supplies for soldiers, food for evacuees. They also opened up within the first hours a little high-tech unit of about 12 or 14 people, from what I understand, who were all writing code to use AI to go through all of the social media that was being posted, and by Hamas itself, to use facial recognition to track who had been killed or captured. And eventually the army came in and absorbed them and took over their program and them, and into that to continue, because for the first week, again, we didn't know who was missing, who was killed, who was captured. We didn't have a handle on that at all. So this is just some of the things that the citizenry has been taking a front step for. Here's some more pictures. They're in the expo parking lot. So it's like this enormous parking lot that they've taken over. Going through a house, people are donating all sorts of things, household goods, clothing, toys, games, whatever different people are going to need who are away from their homes for a long time. This is the Hamal, as we call it, up north in Migdal. So we're connected with someone from Kiryat Shmona who's opened up a smaller scale thing than the one in Tel Aviv. to again provide for all of those from Kiryat Shmona and the northern border communities who are more or less staying around Tiberias in the area. So they need everything also. They need clothing and they need diapers and baby formula and toiletries. And we got them a bunch of tablets so the kids could do Zoom school, and also just not drive their parents crazy. We told them to open up a little lending library. So we gave them a budget to go buy a bunch of books for children and adults of all ages so people can have things to read as well. And they need to do laundry. So we said, yes, go out and buy some washing machines and dryers. So here they are on their way to go there. This is a party for families who have, who's mostly whose fathers are called up. So they did like a fun day. So they wanted to have activities and games for the kids and little things also for the mothers, so that they can, just, as we say, lichabek, just to hug them. It's very difficult when your father or husband hasn't been home for 100 days and counting, or maybe a day here and a day there. Resilience. All right. So this is a migunit, so one of these little bomb shelters by bus stops down south, and they're all in there. They're in the moshavim and the kibbutzim, and also along the road when there's a bus stop. And we're not just going to leave it looking ugly and gray. So all of these bus stops over the years have been painted. Artists come down and draw, paint them, try to make them look a little bit less ugly and a little bit more welcoming. But I don't know what other country in the world is like okay with the fact that they have to have bomb shelter bus stops everywhere. This is something that we've just resiliently gotten used to over the years. And we shouldn't have had to, but we have. I'm going to transition now to a little bit. The Nova Festival was at Kibbutz Re'im, in a JNF forest near Re'im. And so this is a grassroots memorial to all the people who were slaughtered and kidnapped there. Israeli citizens, they came out and did this themselves. This is not some big government type of thing, where they have here, you can see the picture of every single person who was killed or kidnapped. And people have come, and you can see they've lit candles, they've brought flowers, they've written poems. When we were there, some famous Israeli, I forget his name, but when he was singing, I'm like, oh, I've heard that song on the radio, was there with the family of like 10, 15 people singing. I guess it was this person's favorite song. When we were there, I'd say hundreds of people were coming to visit. So in private cars, in buses, army units, police units. It's become like a pilgrimage site. It's a site of pilgrimage and mourning, of national mourning, and it is all grassroots. And I, of course, went and found Hirsch Goldberg Poland. I know the family. I know Hirsch. I don't know if you can see, but Rachel Goldberg has asked everyone to count the days. So today's day 110 that Hirsch, as she says, has been stolen from us along the other hostages. And to do that every day is a way to mark this terrible thing that's happened to him and his family and all of us. So it's like we're in war routine. Everyone's going about their business. I don't think if we didn't watch the news, like in most of the country now, you wouldn't know a war is going on. But at the same time, you know a war is going on because these posters are everywhere. People are walking around with their bring them home dog tags and their masking tape. And so on one hand, life goes on because otherwise Hamas has won, and it really does go on. But there's this pallor. It's just hanging over us, what's going on, because it's unescapable, because we all know someone who's been hurt or killed, God forbid, kidnapped. So it's there. You can't make, your eggs without thinking about the hostages. So this is on the box of eggs I had today. Bring them home. And the Biyachad Nenatzeach is everywhere as well. Like every ad on the TV or the radio or in print, everyone has to say, together we're going to win. Together we're going to win. It's like you can't do an ad now without saying Biyachad Nenatzeach. And now I'm just showing you some pictures of Kfar Aza, which was, again, literally borders the fence with Gaza and was really hard hit. So one of the survivors, a lovely man named Elon, took us around. Young guy in his 30s, has like 2 kids. And these are the people on the Kitat Konanut, so the emergency response team for the kibbutz, who were all killed on their way to the armory. They didn't even really make it into the armory to get their guns. And so that's that building. This is another house, and they put up posters. So this Nitzan Liebstein was brutally murdered in this house. Do you see that diamond with the C in it? After October 7th, the army is coming in and they have to clear everything, and they were still looking for terrorists. And it took a number of days, probably a full week, until they realized that they've actually gotten all of them. So the C and the diamond means that it's been cleared by the Yahalom unit. So Yahalom is an elite unit that really does explosives, they're sappers. They're also the ones who lay mines and things like that. Yahalom means diamond, so that's why they have their signet. They're put everything in a diamond, and so they've had to go house to house everywhere and clear them to make sure that they're not booby trapped. Then there's this other house, and you can see that there's a circle with a dot in it. And that means that when they went through, the army went through, they found a dead body inside. And they just left the dead body because you had to wait for Zaka to come. So Zaka, the Orthodox, mostly Orthodox, ultra-Orthodox men who clean up, who come and clean dead bodies and prepare them for burial, whether it's a traffic accident or, let's say, in the years that we're having bombings or other terrorist attacks. So they're the ones who will come and have the gruesome job of sometimes collecting body parts, which, when there were a lot of suicide bombings here, was a reality, and the blood and everything, because they really believe in the mitzvah that everyone deserves a really proper Jewish burial, and that's of utmost importance, and to be buried with dignity. So Zaka was completely overloaded, and they were interviewing these Zaka guys on TV all the time. And it's bad, and what they saw was bad, when these guys who literally for 20, 30 years have been cleaning up after bus bombings, shootings, car accidents, can't keep it together for 5 minutes while they're being interviewed on TV. Their hands are shaking, their voices are cracking, and they start breaking out crying. So, and every one of them said, and we know right now we're not thinking about anything, but we all know that we need therapy. We all know that we're going to have PTSD from this. So like that awareness of how horrible this is. And I think it was also very important for the Israeli public to see that these Orthodox and ultra-Orthodox men who may not serve in the army are serving the country in a different way. And I think that was also sort of very healing, considering the rifts that have been going on in Israeli society up until Simchat Torah. So that was like very important, that they were the face of this recovery movement. So once Zaka comes, they will then put up this poster that says Mizukeh, which meant that they've cleared the dead body. And I just wanted to get this close up. You see, the date. So this was already only on November 14th did they clear the body out of this place. And Team 6 and the guy named who did it was Emmanuel. And on the left, all the bullet holes in this metal door. And lastly, Har Herzl is, usually I find it to sort of be an uplifting place, sad but uplifting. Right now it's heart-wrenching. There's the whole new section of all these new graves being built, and sort of seeing the behind the scenes of how graves are done in Har Herzl, because you very rarely go when there's a funeral going on, and now multiple funerals every day, and they have they're all in the same section. It's sort of chronological, and These ones here are relatively new, but they're past their shloshim, they're 30 days because they actually have their tombstones on. But these are graves that they were literally just buried a day or two before I was there. I was there when I was actually there, and there was a funeral going on for someone in Golani. And there's just a marker, of course, with what will be eventually on their tombstone of who they were and when they fell and everything, and all the wreaths that were laid at the funeral, or people coming later who can't always make it to the funeral because they're serving but still want to come and visit their comrade's grave. Or maybe it's a relative and they weren't able to get there in time for the funeral. So now there are just all of these fresh graves with the dirt still there. And if you look here to the left, you can see they do the lay all the stonework for like the pathway at the end. So like these graves all look much higher than when you go to other parts of the cemetery because they haven't put down the flagstones yet that we all walk on. So like it was so interesting in a way to see like, oh, that's how they do this, how they make everything look so nice and uniform. But that's next stage. That's not now. Right now it's raw. On that, I'm just going to end and let me stop sharing. And please, questions. I think that's the way to go with this. Oh, I see that we might have some chat people. But no, I don't want to do that.
Thank you, Kayla.
Okay.
I mean, that's a lot to even synthesize, and it really takes us right there. Let me ask, does anybody have any questions?
Well, I see someone wrote in the chat something about the letter C being used rather than the Hebrew letter. It's interesting. A lot of the stuff is done in English, and I don't know if that's because there's maybe some type of international standard or something that goes this way. I don't know why, but yes, they do use English. Also, my best friend's son, he's really like my nephew, is finishing up paratroopers right now, his training, and he has his gun at home now, and his initials are on it. And I'm like, oh, Nadav, you put yours in English, NF. And he's like, oh no, Kayla, we all put it in English. Because I was like, he's an Anglo. So I'm like, oh, he wrote his in English, not in Hebrew. But he's like, no, we all do it in English. So, so I don't know why it is in English, but that's the marking that they use. Okay, anyone else with a question or a comment?
I just had a question. Sorry, I had to join late, so I kind of missed like the first 20 minutes. Can you just say like your connection to this work or like what your role has been? And the part that I saw was really moving and informative. So thank you for sharing.
Okay, so I'm a tour guide and I'm an Israeli, you know, but a lot of the pictures I took were when I was guiding a solidarity mission 2 weeks ago. So on that mission, we were picking lemons, which I must say, first of all, did you know lemons had thorns? I did not. And for the, we were picking for a few hours here and there. And I must say there was like 1.5 hour moment when I was picking, and it was probably the most calm time in the past 3 months because I was very zen on just getting the lemons. But we visited Kfar Aza, which was hard hit. We visited that the memorial site to the Nova party. We also went to the car graveyard, which I didn't put the pictures in, but where they cleared all the burnt out cars from the party and along the road, and they put them all in one area near Netivot. It's very apocalyptic. It looks like a movie set almost. We met with soldiers. We met with people who are evacuees, and they told us the story of, what happened to them on October 7th and now what it's like 3 months on living in a hotel, and what's going to be and when they're going to feel safe going home. So a lot of the stuff I was showing you now is things that I saw because I was with a group going to near Gaza and volunteering in other places. I myself have been volunteering just in my own community, the way a lot of people have, which is, taking care of the people in our community. In my synagogue have people who've been called up. So whether it's care packages, bringing food, or helping walk their dog, or whatever it is, we've all been trying to do things like that. There's been a huge amount of people, giving blood, you know, especially at the beginning. You know, they turned the arena sports, you know, center into where they had this huge blood drive, and people were lining up for hours and hours to give blood. And they constantly need blood because soldiers and people are getting hurt every day. So they aren't in that crisis mode at the beginning, but it's constant. So now I'm arranging a blood drive for my synagogue that we're going to be doing a blood drive, you know, in a few weeks. So it's not that I have any specific thing. It's just as a tour guide, you go to places with people, and just as a person living here, you know, stuff that I've been doing.
Kayla, I know that before October 7th, you were in the streets every Motzei Shabbat, every Saturday night, and it's, in some ways, social media is a way to connect across, and protesting in front of the Prime Minister's house and the President's house. Tell me what's happening, and what's the spirit with regard to the current administration? Has that changed? Maybe it hasn't changed. Where are people putting that energy?
So that Brothers in Arms, that 15,000 people who are mobilized within a few hours, they were able to do that because Brothers in Arms were a huge organizer of these anti-democratic overhaul protests. And they have basically, they and others basically took over caring for the civilians because the government was completely and utterly absent the first few weeks. And I would dare say 3 months in, many of the ministries still are. The whole country was being run the first few days by WhatsApp group. I swear to God, and Google Doc. It was like crazy. And it still is. So immediately, though, the political protests, everyone said, that's it, we're at war, we're not talking about this anymore. Any legislature in the government, it's a special unity government during war. Only legislature that is dealing with the war is acceptable. And basically all that democracy stuff just completely by the wayside. Now, with 3 months in, there's a lot of talk about, there's no trust whatsoever in Netanyahu. I think he's polling at something like 20% or something. People who trust him, or 25. I don't even, it's very low. Everyone knows that Netanyahu, that's it. He's done. The question is you don't go to elections while you have a war going on. So we still have this unity government, but the government is completely ineffective. They're trying now to pass the budget for 2024, and we're starting to see that the same old coalition stuff and giving money to where it doesn't need to go, and for these bloated, ineffectual ministries where we have all of the reservists who are like, can't pay their bills, you know, a small business owner, his falafel shop's been closed for 3 months, yet he still has to pay rent and his tax and everything, and he has no income, yet where's his help? You know, the health system, obviously, mental health. We didn't have enough mental health professionals to begin with. Never mind that this whole country is having PTSD or will have PTSD. I mean, every age group, everywhere, no matter where you're from, you're going to have PTSD. And we need to, like, and never mind physical and occupational therapy for all the people who are being wounded. We've had hundreds of casualties of people who have been killed. Many times that people have been wounded. Now, in previous years or previous wars, the number of wounded would have been higher, but our combat medics and our doctors and Israel has developed so many medical interventions for the battlefront that people who normally would have died are making their way to the hospital and their lives are being saved. But there's also a lot of amputees. So, you know, that's going to be, we need more money in the healthcare system. Now, also the educational system, you've got parallel schools, you've got people who their schools were destroyed or they're being relocated. So you need to figure out where to push them. You know, all these people who aren't at home and where are they going to be and where they're going to be semi-resettled and everything. So education, you know, all these social services things like, and there's like no faith in the current government, and yet we're feeling this paradox, like we can't protest and go call for new elections and have elections right now because we're in the middle of a war, But at the same time, we need a new government that we feel comfortable with. So if Netanyahu would just step aside, someone else could take over Likud. We wouldn't have to go to new elections. We could form a new government. Other parties would join in. We'd be able to push out some of the other more extreme parties, and sort of things would go along well. But unfortunately, we're dealing with someone here who is yet to take responsibility for anything that's happened, where everybody else has. Every other politician and all the higher ups in the army going back years have all taken responsibility. So that's a problem. Now, starting the past week or so, there's starting to be calls now for these protests to start up again, calling for elections and a new government. And also, the Supreme Court made its ruling on a piece of legislation that was passed in September, which struck it down. So if the war weren't going on right now, we'd all be talking about that, and how there'd be infighting and everything right now. They sort of struck it down, and it sort of went by quietly because the people in the government they're like, no, not to talk about the judicial reform right now. So I see, as I've said many times to other people, you probably heard this, Rabbi, from up until October 6th, my kishkis were in a knot, and I was very worried about the future that Israel's taking. I was like, this is not the Zionist dream I had in mind when I made Aliyah. And what is the future for me here in Israel? I never once doubted that I'd live my life here. And all of a sudden I'm like, well, what's my future going to look like 20 years from now in this country? And my kishkas were in a knot. And so since Simchat Torah, my kishkas in a knot, but for a completely different reason. But I had a lot more faith that we're going to come out of this better and stronger and in a better place than we went in. I still feel that way, but I guess I'm a little less naive that it's going to be a little rocky. It's still going to be rocky to get there, but we'll get there. And some of those things that I just mentioned, the Zaka, the fact that 2,000 Haredi men signed up to get drafted into the army a week after October 7th. They're drivers, they might be mashgiach, they might be, who knows what they're doing. They're not combat soldiers, but they did basic training, they're in uniform, they sang Hatikva when they got, their beret, and they are going home to their home communities in Bnei Brak and Mea Shearim or wherever in their uniforms. And so far, out of this 2,000, I've seen only one, and believe me, if it happened, we would see it on the news, of one soldier who was attacked when he went home, and some other lady on the street yelling at the guy who was attacking him. So everyone else, they're going home, and there's things that we've seen on social media where they come home into their apartment building, and everyone in the apartment building who are all Haredi get out and are singing and clapping and Am Yisrael Chai and welcome home. So there's a little shift here that might be happening in the Haredi community about knowing that they need to integrate better. It doesn't mean that they're all going to be happily serving in the army, but maybe national service, maybe, ambulance and Zaka and doing things like that. And all of a sudden to be seen in a uniform is not a shanda, which means that your sisters aren't going to be able to get a shidduch because the brother's in the army. So, there are these things going. I don't know when there are going to be elections. I don't know how this is going to play out. The huge question mark right now is what's going to happen with the northern border. And are we only on sort of a phase down right now with the Gaza operation to catch our breath, because it's about to get really bad up north, and we just don't know. If Hezbollah will pull back like they're supposed to be past the Litani River, people will go home, and that's it. But so far that hasn't happened. I'm just reading this, what Barbara wrote.
Let's see, Barbara.
Okay, places to donate right now.
A great question.
Yeah, listen, I think Magen David Adom does great work. There's a lot of controversy right now because they are affiliated with the Red Cross, with the International Red Cross. So on one hand, we need to support Magen David Adom because there are blood services and our emergency and ambulance services. But at the same time, there's a lot of call for them to break from the Red Cross because they have been completely absent when it comes to the hostages. And as Rachel Goldberg said, they've been nothing but an Uber. when their hostages are released, all they did was ferry them into their cars and take them across the border to Egypt. So meanwhile, I'm trying to organize a blood drive with my Gang David Dome, and they need supplies. So I don't know what to tell you. Keshet, we are running our own emergency fund. I can put that in the link. And we're basically doing very grassroots. We've given grassroots things or funding things that are like between the cracks. That, you know, the Federation and JNF and this, they raise millions and millions of dollars in CJP, and those all go to very large projects and definitely worthwhile projects, but on a very large scale. And sometimes it takes time for them to do the due diligence in this, and it could be months until the money's dispersed. We were spending money on October 8th. We were spending money, giving it money to families that left Nativa Asarak for Aza Be'eri, who had nothing, like 5,000 shekel grants to families. We had a bunch of people who were staying in Yerucham and being put up there by the student village and the yeshiva and families. And we just sent supplies, tables, chairs, blankets, cooking materials, food, staples. We've given money to Zaka to help them with their therapy. Like we said, the up north, they needed supplies, so we've been helping to fund that. We've been getting supplies at the beginning, less need now, to units, reserve units. There's so many people called up so quickly that the IDF, it just took them a few weeks until they could actually get all of their supplies where they needed to go. But we've been very active in what we call the drone project. So buying these very civilian but specialized drones that are able to protect units and save lives. So that's something that we've been pivoting towards in terms of the what we've been doing for the soldiers. The rest has really been on the civilian front. So again, helping mostly evacuees be able to live their lives right now in limbo. I'll just put that here. If you go onto the website, you can actually see blogs.
We share that, and Temple Bethel has sent some funds Keshet's way, and we'll send over.
Right.
And it's a great way to it's a smaller scale, more personal way to support you know, Kayla and Yitzhak know, you know, who needs toiletries, right? As
it's very
know
like
things. So
working through personal people within the communities. So Jeff Winston, who works with me, his brother-in-law is from the Tiva Asara. So who's Barak, who's been talking to our missions and everything as well. So Barak is able to say, yes, this family, they need money. They need intervention. They need this right now. It's not just random, you know, it's like we have people on the ground who actually know specifically who needs what. So that's how we've been working.
I've also been suggesting Leket. It sounds like they're doing
Leket's doing great work. Yes,
and Natal. Are you familiar with Natal? I feel like those seem to be also sort
of Natal is for psychiatric and psychological treatment. So yes, Natal's a great idea. Leket has been organizing buses for volunteers to go down and pick. When I was picking lemons, there was a group there from Leket. They were people who were volunteering, and Leket paid for the bus. You know, people have to get to these places. They're not easy to get to. And also the Army doesn't want 1 million vehicles running around the OTEF right now. So very little of it is now closed military zone the way it was, 2 months ago. Like you can just sort of drive down, but at the same time, they prefer people not to be just, you know, all over the place. So having a bus bring pickers to go to this one farm and then work there for a few hours and bring them back is great. Someone's got to pay for the bus. Leket's been doing a lot also with preparing meals that are actually going to evacuees and to soldiers. So not just helping the agricultural side of it, but actually providing food for people who need it.
That's great.
Keshet is an organization. We are a private company in Israel. There's the Keshet. There's also a Keshet special needs school in Chicago, I think. So different Keshet, but great name.
I'll ask you one more question, actually, and we'll wrap up. Where would you recommend? What are you reading? What news sources? What are you listening to? What would you suggest that folks engage in to get the voice of Israelis? Because I think that can be hard.
So I read Times of Israel diligently because they're center every day. There's some podcasts. The Hartman Institute has great podcasts. Channel 12 News has an English podcast called Unholy. And it's with Yonit Levy, who's she does the nightly news, and her English is great because her parents are American, with this guy who writes for The Guardian in the UK, and he's Jewish. So you get like a diaspora and an Israeli version, and they're good podcasts. So they very good topics. In terms of like Instagram accounts, I mean, Noah Tishby is doing awesome stuff. And my favorite crush now is Alon Levy. He's like the British Israeli guy who's been like crushing it. Oh, by the way, Sarah Netanyahu just wanted to get him fired because he dared to be part of the protests and say something negative about Netanyahu a year ago. And there was such outrage here that seems to have been like enough pushback that it's not going to happen. But anyway, he's very good in terms of social media and seeing his interviews.
He has good eyebrows.
Yeah. Oh my God, that's like a meme. Danny Gordis has been doing a lot of good writing. That's just off the top of my head.
Yeah. No, thank you. I figured it's always good to hear. Anyone else have any other questions for Kayla?
Give my regards to Barry and Judith.
Okay. Excellent. Well, thank you. You know, we're really trying to give a perspective of what it's like to be in Israel right now and to hear Israeli voices, and grateful for you sharing your insights as always, and grateful for everything you're doing in the moment, and with Solidarity Missions, and continuing to teach as you do so very well. So thank you for taking time. What time is it there,
Really?
Kayla? Is it
It's only 8 o'clock.
Okay, so it's not too bad.
No. I like this lunch and learn. It's a good time.
It's a good time. Yeah, no,
right.
That works.
And again, thank you all for your interest and your care and your support.